Okay, so today we're diving into a really powerful new study that uncovers the hidden story of ADHD in women and girls. And what we're going to see is that a late diagnosis isn't just some minor inconvenience. It comes with this whole cascade of devastating costs. So, the big question this study from the British Journal of Psychiatry really gets into is one that, let's be honest, many of us have been asking for years. Why on earth does it consistently take so much longer for females to get an ADHD diagnosis compared to males? But the researchers don't just stop there. They push it further, asking, what is the real, tangible cost of this delay? Because as we're about to find out, this isn't just about getting a label later in life. We're talking about a series of severe consequences that can literally ripple through a person's entire world. To really understand the problem, we've got to go all the way back to childhood. The study pretty much debunks this whole idea of late emerging ADHD. Instead, what it finds is something much, much more concerning.
And here it is, the first major insight. The girls who ended up being diagnosed later in life, they weren't just fine and symptom-free as kids, not even close. The study found the warning signs were there all along. They were just being systematically, completely missed.
I mean, this data really says it all. If you just look at that middle bar, the girls who got diagnosed late, you can see clear as day that they had significantly more learning difficulties as children than their peers who didn't have ADHD. The struggle was already happening.
And the impact on their schoolwork is just as stark. We see the exact same pattern here with early exam failures, even in primary school. That late diagnosed group was already failing more often than their undiagnosed peers. You could see the distress right there in their report cards.
You know, it wasn't just about academics either. The data shows that even way back in childhood, the late diagnosed group already had higher rates of anxiety. The internal struggle was starting long before any diagnosis ever came. So the crucial takeaway here is this. These girls were not okay. They weren't struggling enough to fit that classic, often male-centric picture of ADHD that gets an early diagnosis, but they were struggling so much more than their peers. They were basically stuck in a diagnostic blind spot.
So, if the signs were there in childhood, what happened next? Well, this is where the study reveals the true, painful cost of that waiting period, especially during those incredibly vulnerable teenage years. And this is the gut-wrenching paradox that the study uncovered. It's totally counterintuitive, but the girls who had the seemingly less severe symptoms as kids, the ones who were missed, they actually went on to have far more severe and dangerous outcomes as teenagers. This slide just lays it out in black and white. While the early diagnosed group had their own struggles, mostly with academics and deprivation, just look at the list for the late diagnosed group. It's an absolute cascade of mental health crises. Depression, self-harm, substance use, just devastating stuff. Let's just pause on that for a second. Over a third, more than a third of the females who were diagnosed late ended up self-harming. That is just a staggering, heartbreaking statistic. And the numbers just keep painting this grim picture. More than half experienced depression. This isn't just a minor struggle we're talking about. It's a full-blown mental health crisis happening inside a group of people who were completely overlooked as children. So the key insight here is pretty profound. It seems that getting that diagnosis in childhood, even if your symptoms were more obvious or severe, actually acts as a kind of protective shield, potentially warding off this torrent of mental health issues in adolescence. But the study adds another crucial layer to this whole story. This isn't just about when you're diagnosed, it's also about your sex. Turns out the consequences of a late diagnosis are not felt equally at all. The researchers found that for many of the most serious outcomes we've been talking about, the harm caused by waiting for a diagnosis was significantly worse for females than it was for males. This is a critical gender equity issue right at the heart of our healthcare system. And this table just makes that disparity impossible to ignore. I mean, look down the list. Depression, stronger link in females. Self-harm, females. Drug use, bipolar disorder. For all of these severe outcomes, the connection to a late diagnosis was stronger in females. They are paying a much higher price for that delay. So, what does all of this add up to? All this evidence points to one incredibly powerful conclusion: the massive importance of early intervention and the power a timely diagnosis has to literally change lives. So let's just quickly recap the crucial points. 1. A delayed diagnosis is actively harmful. 2. The warning signs in girls are there in childhood, if we just know what to look for. 3. Waiting unleashes this cascade of severe mental health issues. 4. This harm hits females disproportionately hard.
And finally, number 5, a timely diagnosis isn't just a label. It's a critical, life-altering protective factor.
You know, the study's own authors put it perfectly. They say, timely childhood ADHD diagnosis may help to mitigate later risks, especially for females. This isn't just a theory, it's a conclusion drawn from the data of an entire nation.
Which leaves us all with one final urgent question. Now that we have this evidence, now that we can see the early signs and we understand the profound cost of missing them, how many girls right now are sitting in that same struggling middle ground, being completely overlooked?